All right, what's going on? Drive time on a Thursday afternoon. About 15 minutes past the hour, 2 o'clock. We are a little late today because admittedly, Sean and I misbehaved during crosstalk, but beautiful day outside. It is sunny and clear, a little chilly, of course, because, it's January. But as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That is Porter Larson behind the glass tonight, producing the show this afternoon, I should say. It's still afternoon. We will take you into the evening. We will get you ready for the college football semifinal, and we'll talk some college football on the show. Today actually marks the start of really 5 days of excellent football action, if you're into such things. We got a little Notre Dame, Penn State tonight. Then, of course, Ohio State, Texas tomorrow. And then high speed ahead to the wild card weekend in pro football. Zay Flowers will not play coming up this weekend for Baltimore against the Steelers. I didn't realize Zay Flowers is the first all-pro wide receiver ever drafted by the Baltimore Ravens. That kind of caught me off guard. But Zay Flowers will sit, but the Ravens are a pretty heavy favorite there. So we'll get you ready for the game tonight. Should be fun. The Orange Bowl in Miami, Hard Rock Stadium, Miami Gardens, Florida, where, as of now, the line is even. Penn State, slight favorite. Notre Dame, slight favorite. It kind of went back and forth. But according to what I have in front of me as of right now, that line has moved to even. Over-under is 44.5. These are two really good defensive football teams. So it'll be fun to see how this one plays out. James Franklin with some comments about Notre Dame joining a conference, thinly veiled shots, I suppose, at Notre Dame, who does not need to join a conference, as they've shown. And if they go win the national championship, they're going to have a nice $20 million check for themselves, as opposed to sharing that revenue with their conference peers. So you kind of understand the model. BYU tried to do it for a while, but Notre Dame really is the one institution that seems to have been able to pull this off. Tomorrow's game, Cotton Bowl in Arlington, sees Ohio State take on Texas. Ohio State is now a 6-point favorite. I still think that line is not necessarily reflective of how I believe that game will roll. I think Ohio State beats them by double digits. And then, of course, national championship game, January the 20th. So plenty of college football left to talk about on the program today. The Utah Jazz are back in action tonight, taking on the Miami Heat. We saw a great NBA game last night. And, a lot of the conversation surrounding pro basketball this year has been the lack of interest and the lack of ratings. But if you watched last night, it's a reminder of what that game can look like when the best players on the planet care and play hard. It was the Cavs and the Thunder. It was really entertaining. Donovan struggled. It was Darius Garland down the stretch and some excellent play by their bigs, Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. Donovan, 3 of 16, took 16 shots to score 11 points. It actually kind of felt eerily reminiscent of some nights back here when Donovan was playing for the Jazz. But the Cavs get the win. They break OKC's 15-game winning streak for a big game in the world of pro basketball with a lot of eyes on that game. So Jazz back in action tonight. Utah Hockey Club got smoked last night by the Florida Panthers, the defending Stanley Cup champs, and one of the 3 favorites to hoist Lord Stanley's Cup this year. But the Hockey Club has 6 more home games during this 7-game home stretch. Hopefully they can start to pick up some points. The lack of production lately still has not really killed them in the standings. They're in the mix for the wild card. And I think if they can get a wild card playoff berth year 1 in Salt Lake, that would be nothing other than an absolute success. Carson Beck is not going pro. Georgia quarterback who announced he was going pro last week. He's not a very highly thought of pro prospect as of now, but he is coming back to college. He is entering the transfer portal because that's what players do. But a lot of college football on the show today. Pumped for this game tonight. It should be a lot of fun. We'll get you some keys to the matchup. We'll learn a little bit more about both these two teams. And, we'll get to that on the program today. Good guest list. Tony Jones. Been a minute since we've been able to catch up with Tony. He's going to join us right off the top today. Going to bring in Craig Bolajak, Gordon Monson. I'm told live in studio, reunited, and it feels so good. The Big Show, Big Hour here on The Drive, brought to you by Big O Tires. So, Craig Bolajak, Gordon Monson live in studio, and then our guy Ted Robinson, Notre Dame alum. Man, this fan base, I'll tell you what, got a lot of friends that went to Notre Dame. A lot of people excited for this game tonight. Notre Dame has not won a national championship since 1988. So we'll see what Uncle Ted has to say about the game tonight. and then move over to a little sports court on the program, as we do every Thursday with our friends over at Handy and Handy. Tony Jones, Craig Bowler, Jack Gordon Monson, Ted Robinson, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners. Happy Thursday. You have almost made it. And that guy, Porter Larson, with his Vatek outfit on today. You got the Vatek hat and sweatshirt?
No. Color coordinating, but.
Oh, so just a Vatek hat.
Yeah.
Excited for the CFP semifinal tonight?
I am. Obviously, college football playoff top of mind, but a lot of good football still to come in the next 5 days, as you mentioned. Excited for it.
No doubt. So if you're a football fan, you've got 5 days of Nirvana with the CFP semifinal tonight and tomorrow, and then wild card weekend Saturday, Sunday, and Monday in pro football. So Tony Jones will be our first guest right out of the gates. But the ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff is here. Time for your shot to win $1,000 cash. To pay your bills, text FORTUNE to 508-777-1000. That's FORTUNE to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 in cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from all of us here at ESPN 700. Courtesy of Standard Restaurant Supply, your one-stop shop for all of your tailgate needs. It is time now for your opening tip. Programming reminder, we are your home of the biggest and best college football and NFL events in the market. We will have the Orange Bowl on our station tonight following the conclusion of the Craig Smith Coaches Show. So we'll say goodnight about 6 o'clock tonight, and then we'll send it over to Bill and Craig at Slackwater in Salt Lake City for the Utah Men's Basketball Coaches Show. And then after that, we'll get you over to the remaining portion of the Notre Dame-Penn State game in the Orange Bowl. Two historic college football brands that have not won a national championship in quite some time. Notre Dame has not won a national championship since 1988, but they are looking for their 9th natty in the AP era, which is second only to Alabama. Now, Penn State, on the other hand, has not won a national championship since 1986. So, two coaches that I think are very, very likable. It's been funny to kind of watch the back and forth. James Franklin, some comments about how he believes every program in college football should be in a conference. Now, because of what we do in the modern day and age of media consumption, we react to a 30-second soundbite. He went on to talk about scheduling uniformity in college football, which is something I've talked about for a number of years. I think it's beyond time that every team has to play the same amount of conference games. And, ultimately there has to be some sort of centralized scheduling uniformity that makes it just a little bit more even. We were talking about this over the course of this week. I think it was Scott Mitchell who brought it up, where ultimately, if you're Utah, if you're BYU, you're really, kind of at the mercy of the schedule makers as it pertains to the teams you'll play in conference. The cruel irony for the past season of Utah football is that Utah football actually had a very manageable, and I put manageable in air quotes because nobody knew anything about the Big 12. But when the Utah schedule came out, it was a very manageable Big 12 schedule, and that was just luck of the draw. BYU actually had a much harder schedule, and that's just, unfortunately, the reality of it. Where, on the NFL side of things, obviously, you have schedule makers that are in a little bit more lockstep with what exactly a fair schedule is going to be. Now, year in and year out, divisions ebb and flow. So if you're in a bad division, you're going to get a little bit more lucky. But all of the conversation today about like James Franklin and what he had to say about the whole thing, I think ignored actually the forest through the trees. But have two really good defensive teams. Interestingly enough, for all the conversation about the offensive explosion in college football over the past few years, the four teams left are four of the top 7 defensive teams in all of college football. Notre Dame is the best team in college football at takeaways. They have 31 takeaways. That's best in college football. They're the best team in college football as far as points per game. They have won the turnover margin in every game except one, and you know exactly what game that was. That was week 2 against Northern Illinois, which is wild to think that game actually went down, as Notre Dame has run off 12 straight games with a win last game, taking care of Georgia. They have now won 13 games for the first time in Notre Dame history. When you can say something has happened for the first time in Notre Dame history, it means it's pretty exciting. But it feels like this is Notre Dame's game to me. Jeremiah Love is healthy, their leading rusher, and apparently he's not even wearing a brace. Marcus Freeman was asked today about, there was this online rumor that the flu bug kind of went through the Notre Dame locker room. Marcus Freeman said that wasn't true. I guess they had a wide receiver. Bo Collins was sick last week, but he actually caught a touchdown against Georgia. And Jeremiah Love was also a little sick. But that, according to Marcus Freeman, that rumor that's going around is not true at all. And, ultimately both these two teams do very similar things when it comes to the defensive side. The Notre Dame's numbers are a little bit better. Penn State's one of the top 7 defensive teams in college football, both points per game, then against the run. And both these teams want to run the football. So I don't know that we're going to see a very high-scoring game. I think we'll see a close game. Again, the Vegas line has moved to even. But two historic programs looking for their first national championship since the 1980s. And, of course, we will get you ready for this game throughout the entire show today. Ted Robinson's going to join us to break this thing down a little bit later. But Tony Jones is our first guest on a Thursday afternoon, so keep her right here on ESPN 700. Monson, both live in the studio. Coming up, call that about a half hour from right now. Uncle Pat Robinson, buddies from the Pac-12 Network back in the day. Another thing, we'll stop by to preview tonight's CFP semifinal. Was that the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
I believe so.
Very nice. Any reason we decided to play that today?
You sent it to me.
Oh, Tony's on the phone, right? So it's the Tony Jones interview time, right?
That is true.
On a Thursday, TJ, it's between us, pal. How you doing?
I just don't understand you guys sometimes.
You know, you know that your secrets are safe with me. I just figured you'd like that bump on a Thursday, right?
That is really funny. How are you?
I'm good, man.
Happy New Year.
Happy
New Year to you guys.
To you as well. We haven't spoken to you in the new year. Where do we find you these days? It feels like you're always traveling to and from.
I am currently in Denver.
Currently in Denver. Okay. Well, Denver's a lovely city. Are you enjoying your time in Denver?
I am bedridden with the flu.
Oh, my goodness.
No, literally, I went out to Denver, and I left for Denver on Monday because the Nuggets had the Celtics on Tuesday, so huge game, and then the Clippers on Wednesday, so even a big game. So I was like, okay, so we're gonna go and we're gonna spend the week in Denver. Got off the plane, got to the hotel, just almost immediately got sick. Now the other thing is, Nikola Jokic did not play on Tuesday or Wednesday because I think that he caught the same thing that I have.
So you and the Joker with the flu in Denver this week, huh?
Me and the Joker have the flu in Denver. This is factual.
Okay. My goodness. Well, I hope you feel better soon because that's not fun. Obviously, this time of year, a bunch of stuff going around. And let's just start with a little Jazz, Tony, even though you've been busy covering a bunch of other teams for the Athletic because the Jazz this year are unserious about winning. But I feel—
You didn't read my story on Monday?
What do you mean? Did you write a story about the Jazz?
I wrote a story about the Jazz. It ran on in Monday's Athletic.
Well, then I'm glad I'm asking you about the Jazz. That means you're uniquely qualified to talk. I know that you're traveling around covering other teams. Obviously, we know that you have one eye on the Jazz at all times. I know you watch all their games. But here's what I wanted to ask you. Even though the wins haven't necessarily been coming, it does – I mean, they went down to Florida, won a couple of games. But even in losing efforts, it just feels like there are signs that are pretty good that are kind of revealing themselves that were not around earlier in the year when they were just getting trucked. So what are you seeing from them that I would just ask you is a little bit encouraging right now?
I think whenever the Jazz decide that they want to be competitive again, I think they're going to be competitive pretty easily. Night. I mean, a competitive and entertaining team, and it's a competitive and entertaining product. And I think if you're a Jazz fan, you have to be encouraged by the progress that's being made. Bryce Sensabaugh, we didn't know coming into the season whether he's an NBA player. Now he kind of has the look of a guy who can be your sixth man. Isaiah Collier and Kyle Filipowski are getting, meaningful reps. So, this could easily be, like a ship with no rudder in terms of, this could look like the Washington Wizards. It could look like the Charlotte Hornets, or it could look like, what the New Orleans Pelicans have regressed into this season. But, the Jazz have found themselves in a position where they're kind of, I don't want to say it like this, but they kind of have to try hard to lose these games. And, I think that that's a good thing because I think that it means that, the players are buying into everything that Will Hardy's doing. Will Hardy's, keeping the group engaged. These guys are going out and they're playing hard from night to night, and they've been competitive because of it.
Let me follow up with how you kind of led your answer when you said when the Jazz want to get back to being competitive, they'll be able to do that pretty quickly. What do you think that looks like? When they lean into really competing night in and night out, do you think that's something that's a year down the road, 2 years down the road? I mean, there are so many promising prospects, not just this year but next. and we're going to have one of them in our backyard with the A.J. DeBansa kid heading down to Provo. So when do you think, in your estimation, the Jazz will lean into actually being competitive again? What does that look like?
In my opinion, I think the Jazz should, lose 60 games this year, and I think they should try to lose 60 games next year, because the top of this draft and the top of the 2026 draft are the top of the 26th draft. The first three kids in that draft, we all know A.J. DeBansa, and we all know Cameron Boozer. But there's also a kid named Darren Peterson. He's committed to Kansas, and that kid is special. There are three franchise players at the top of the 26th draft, and obviously there's Cooper Flagg and there's Dylan Harper at the top of the 25 draft. So in these two drafts, in my opinion, there are five guys who I think are franchise level guys or potential franchise level guys. So if you're the Jazz, you got to try to come away with at least one of them, if not try to come away with two of them. That means losing a lot. How that looks for them, I don't know, because I don't know that they can lose on the level that's needed, for that to happen. I mean, even with all the losing they've done this season, they're still, right now, they still only have the fifth best lottery odds if the season were to end today, because there are teams that they're just not going to be worse than. But, at the same time, if you're the Jazz, you definitely want to be at the top of this draft, and you want to be at the top of next year's draft. And then, if that comes to fruition, then, after that, you can try to go and do all the winning that you want.
Let's have some fun, and let's operate off a fun hypothetical that this plan works out to perfection, and this year and next year, they're able to capture, two of the prospects that you perceive to be the elite prospects. I mean, we can get totally crazy and say they get Cooper Flagg than A.J. DeBansa if we want to have a little fun. If that's the process, if that's the path, 3 years from now, when they lean back into being competitive, who's left from this group on that team?
So we're saying they have Cooper Flagg and A.J. DeBansa.
Yeah, let's get weird. Let's get weird on a Thursday, Tony.
Okay.
You got the flu. We're hanging out. We're getting weird. Let's just get weird.
Right. So that would mean that your starting lineup would be Keontae George, or likely would be Keontae George. A.J. DeBansa would start at shooting guard because, I told you, he's literally Tracy McGrady, another coming to Tracy McGrady. And then your forward, you'd have what I would call the all clear front court. You would have Lauri Markkanen, Cooper Flagg, and Walker Kessler.
Did you say the all clear front court?
The all clear front court.
Tell you what, you're getting Jazz fans excited with that front court. I'm not going to lie.
That would immediately be one of the better front courts in the league, because if you look at what Walker Kessler is doing this year, Walker Kessler has been arguably Utah's best player this season. Lauri Markkanen is still Lauri Markkanen, and I think Cooper Flagg is amazing. I think he's an amazing talent. So if the Jazz were to luck up and get the number one pick in two consecutive drafts, which just doesn't happen, they would, simply put, they'd be in a position to compete at the highest levels, potentially in time. So, and that's the thing that I see with this team. Whoever they draft, there are building blocks already in place. Like Walker Kessler is already in place. Lauri Markkanen is already in place. So you have two guys that I think that, kind of no matter what happens around the roster, these guys are going to be there, and they're going to be building blocks. I would have put Taylor Hendrickson in that category as a role player, except that he obviously had his tragic injury, and we have to see how he comes back from that injury. But I think that the rest of the season is about figuring out who's going to be around in the long run. And right now I can peg Lowry Markin and I can peg Walker Kessler as the two guys right now that I'm most confident will be around in the long run.
What about what about Kyle Filipowski? What has he shown you through the first? He's played 25 games as a rookie. What has Kyle shown you?
Well, I mean, I saw it a little bit in summer league. I just, was a little bit naive and thinking that it would translate to the NBA so soon. But he's a mismatch, especially when he plays at the center spot. He's really good facing the basket. He's better than I thought from three levels because of his ability to put the ball on the floor and play with force. And he has a nasty streak that I didn't think. I watched him plenty at Duke, but I didn't really think that he had a nasty streak the way he does. Early in the season, the Jazz were playing at San Antonio, and Flip found himself facing the basket, about 20 feet from the basket, isolated on Victor Wembanyama, and I'm like, yeah, no way he takes Wemby, and he takes Wemby to the basket, and he draws a foul. That's the kind of fearlessness and the force that he plays with. So, I don't know what happened in the G League. He obviously didn't play as well there, but when he gets in the NBA spacing and he's playing with this group, he's playing well.
Can I follow up about Keontae? Because we're following kind of the ebbs and flows, and in this fun hypothetical where the next 2 years the Jazz won't win very much, but be rewarded for those endeavors by some generational talents. Are you still confident that at some point some of the issues we've seen from Keontae over the first year and a half will settle in? I mean, there's a lot to like. I've never said there's not, but at some point we just need to see a little bit more consistency with the shot selection, the decision making, and quite frankly, shot making. Do you remain confident that he can figure this thing out?
Hang on for 1 second.
You all right? Tony Jones is with us live in.
I'm just having a coughing fit right now.
Oh, okay.
Hang on.
Okay, as long as somebody's not breaking into your hotel room while you're sick. Tony is in Denver suffering from the flu, covering some Nuggets games this week. He did write a piece on the Jazz for The Athletic that dropped on Monday. The Jazz are in action tonight against the Miami Heat, who have a lot of questions to answer themselves with some chaos in their locker room. And then last night we saw OKC Cleveland, so we'll get Tony's take on that as soon as he's back. You good, buddy?
I think I am. Yeah, so we were talking about Keontae, correct?
Yep, correct.
I think, with Keontae, his best attribute is, kind of like Kyle Filipowski, it's a fearlessness. Hang on for a second.
Grab some water this time. While you're coughing, grab some water. We can fill a little time because we have plenty to tease on the show. We've got Craig Bowler, Jack Gordon-Monson live in studio. We have Ted Robinson, who's going to join us to preview tonight's CFP semifinal between Notre Dame and Penn State. That line moved to even. I'll check it coming up in just a little bit. So stay tuned for that. By the way, playoffs are here in the NFL. Check out my friends at Prize Picks, best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members. At billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. It's very easy. You don't have to get lost in the weeds about point spreads and over-unders and such. You just pick two players, and then you pick more or less on you pick more or less on their stat projections. You can win up to 1,000 times your cash right now with Prize Picks. So tonight, the Miami Heat are in town. If you log on to Prize Picks and you go over to the Jazz game, they'll ask you Lowry Markkanen, more or less than 19.5 points. Tyler Hero, more or less than 3.5 three-point field goals made. You just pick more or less, and then if you're right, you're going to win up to 1,000 times your cash. They're giving away free money, so download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. Tony Jones, how we holding up, pal?
I'm alive.
Okay.
That's a good thing, right?
Okay, can I get 5 more minutes out of you?
Yes, you can.
Okay,
So,
Keontae.
I think the thing with Keontae is, that I love is the fearlessness and the ability to score, and he's got to figure out a way to transition from a streaky scorer to a consistent scorer, and I think that's going to hold the key to what he becomes as an NBA player, whether he's a starter or whether he eventually transitions to a six man. I still think that he can be a starter. I think that his offensive instincts are really good. I think that he's got a lot of tricks in his bag, and I think that if you put the right team around him, which I think means putting a playmaking forward around him, he can be a really good starter in this league.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're still confident because I just haven't seen enough just yet. But, the other thing that's hard, Tony, is analyzing a player when they're not surrounded by like elite players every night, right? What do you think Keontae could be when, this thing is fully baked? So every night he's not playing with young players that are still learning how to play, and he actually has some good veteran players that know exactly what Will is asking for them to do, and he's just surrounded by simply better talent. What do you think that looks like for Keontae?
I think that, some of that depends on Keontae, how he develops as a playmaker, how he develops on the defensive end, because I think that that's a real weak spot for him right now. And, how he develops, kind of mentally, does he, go into every game seeing himself as, a 25-point per game scorer if he isn't one, or, does he, go into every game figuring out, what the team needs, what the game needs, and playing to what the game needs. And, that's a big question for him. The thing that, the things that I hold on to from a positive perspective, games like Chicago where, he was, terrific, not only scoring, but, getting others involved. And, you'll see that one out of every, 8 or 9 games where he just seems to get it. And then you'll see one out of every 9 games where it kind of goes the other way. So where does the pendulum swing for Keontae? Does it swing towards, him getting it, or does it swing the other way? And I think that those are questions that the Jazz are going to have to ask and answer for themselves at the end of the year when they evaluate Keontae. And the second thing with Keontae is, I think this part is out of his hands. Like, what if the Jazz get the number 2 pick and, that means Dylan Harper comes to Utah? Dylan Harper's a point guard, and Dylan Harper's a better player than Keontae. So, that part is out of his hands. And, if the Jazz get Dylan Harper or, even somebody like Kaz from Illinois, real, live, really dynamic point guards, then, that's going to put in question to where Keontae is as a Jazz. Anyway, but for Keontae, he has to control what he can control, and, he's got to figure out the turnovers. He's got to figure out the defense.
All right, before I set you loose, one young player that we just haven't talked a ton about, at least this year or over the course of the first couple of years, is Bryce Sensabaugh, who just could not miss on the road trip. And that was his, that's his superpower at Ohio State. He just simply was a pure bucket getter. And that's why the Jazz decided to get back in when he was available to take him where they did. And the question was always, can he get his shot off? Is he quick enough to find some airspace? Is he simply just a spot-up shooter? I've always kind of felt there's a little Dennis Scott to his game, as I've told you. But when you see him make shots the way that he was making shots when he was on that heater, when the Jazz won a couple of games, it gives you some potential faith that maybe he's a rotational piece. Where are you at right now with the development of Bryce Sensabaugh?
He, obviously the shot, the shooting is real. And, the Jazz have long, really thought that he was an elite shooter. But he's gotten his body to the point to where he can get stuff off the dribble at the NBA level now, and he couldn't do that last year. He was a little bit too much overweight, but he lost some pounds. He's gotten his body to the point where he can get to his spots, and when he gets to his spots, he's going to make shots, and he's taken a lot of hard coaching from Will Hardy, and I don't think he's had to earn a lot with Will, and he's had to earn some trust, and I think that he's done that. And the Heat game and the Magic game, those were real glimpses into what he can be. He had 34 and then he had 27, but it was the way he got them. He had the entire offensive arsenal. I mean, he was obviously shooting well from beyond the arc, but he got to mid-range. He was hitting floaters. He got all the way to the basket. He was posting up in the mid-post a little bit. He was playing off the pick and roll. I mean, he just did it in a lot of different ways. He got fouled, went to the free throw line. So you have to be encouraged by what you're seeing out of Bryce Sensabaugh. And, the fact that the Jazz got him so deep into the draft, that's turning out to be a steal at this point.
All right, my guy. Well, hydrate. Do you have some Gatorade, electrolytes? Do you have the proper hydration elements you need to get back on your feet?
I'm trying to, man. I apologize to anybody who almost heard me pass away on this radio interview.
Well, I'm just glad you're okay. Stay safe, travel safe, and hit us up if you need, all right?
No problem. Thank you.
All right, Tony Jones. One of the things I love about this job, among several, it's a wonderful way to make a living, make your way through the world, is you never know when coming into work whether or not you'll have a first, and oftentimes you do. I think that was the first time in 18 years of doing this full time now that I had to pause and do a read while my guest was coughing up a lung to make sure that he's good and safe.
Yeah, that was a new one. We've had similar instances. I remember doing Bill's show once, and this is a first and probably a last. We did call-ins on the midday show.
Oh, yes, you did.
And a caller who wanted to speak on Utah football was on hold, and while he was on hold, apparently got into it with police officers. Like, what? We went to him and we heard, "Am I being detained?" Like he was fighting with cops on the side of the road, and we just kept it live for a second, and Bill was entertained.
Did it have anything to do with the fact that he was on his cell phone trying to talk into a sports talk radio show?
Could be. If you're driving down the freeway, maybe wait until you pull over or get the Siri on the line to call us. Don't be texting and driving.
Should we start taking phone calls on the show?
Yes.
The answer is no.
Let's do it.
It will never happen.
Every segment.
All right. It was just a fundamental difference that we had when we did the show together. But hey, what is for some is not for others. Okay, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. I just saw Gordon's Porsche pull up. I believe Lisa was driving the Cayenne, so she's dropping Gordon off right now. He will shuffle his way up the stairs and join us live in studio. Craig Bolerjack on a game day as well. Now we're going to move over to Ted Robinson. Comprehensive preview of a big game tonight, man. Notre Dame, Penn State. And you can hear the game on this station following the conclusion of the Craig Smith Coaches Show. Drive on a Thursday. It's good to have you with us. Bowler and Monson live in studio. Coming up next right here on ESPN 700. It is time for the big show, big hour. And as a result of some logistics, it's been difficult to get all three of us in studio, but we have accomplished it today on this Thursday afternoon. So we have Craig Bowler-Jack sporting, I love the look. Whenever it's game day, and let's make sure their mics are on. Whenever it's game day, it just looks like you did a set as a crooner down at Gracie's, singing a little Sinatra and just walking right across the street.
Yeah, I just loosened the tie. It was a tough 3-hour little gig, but I'm good. It was that lunch crowd. It's tough out there.
I love the look, man. And just smashing beers.
It's unreal.
On a Thursday. Gordon, that looks like a Budweiser in your cup. And
Yep.
I know that you're not necessarily one that imbibes. What are you drinking in the early afternoon stages of a Thursday?
It is apple beer.
So it's not real beer.
No. Well, I mean, it's apple beer, but I don't think it has alcohol in it.
Are you sure?
We'll find out during the show.
He seems loose, Spence.
All I know is back in the day, I know he won't love me sharing this, but for about a week, my dad was like, man, I really love kombucha. It makes me feel great. I'm like, there's
a little bit of hit in there, right?
Just so you know, Pops, that's why you're feeling good. So apple beer, is this a new hobby of yours?
Actually, it's a trip back in time for me because when I was a kid on the East Coast, apple beer was a little more of a thing.
Sure.
But I haven't really had much of it since then. So I thought, what the heck? I went grocery shopping.
I don't believe that for a second.
Is there video of this?
Yeah, I don't believe that for a second.
Where'd you go? Because we're calling right now.
I went to the grocery stores down the street from me. I was supposed to pick something up.
Yeah.
And I picked up a cart and went up and down the aisles, man. And, it's just so amazing what's in these grocery stores. You take it for granted, right? But I mean, I'm not there very often, and so I looking around, and I was going, "How come Lisa never gets that?" And so I started just cherry picking stuff off the aisle.
Wait, did she leave you to your own devices at the store?
Yeah, she wasn't there. It was just me.
But he's talking like he wants the Nobel Peace Prize, and he went grocery shopping.
Gosh, did you hit all the aisles, all 24 of them?
I didn't go up and down every one of them, but I went up. I think I skipped the kitchen cleaning appliance.
Stunning.
Yeah, but I went up and down most of them.
Oh, wow.
So
did you do this as a push cart or a hand just holding?
A push cart.
No, you got in the little scooter.
Oh, I would pay to see that.
Can't you see Gordon just rolling around the store in the little jazz scooter?
Get out of the way.
Okay, Bolo, wait a second. Well, hold on here. When you guys go to the grocery store, what do you buy?
The necessities that I need to live.
Yeah. Like what, though? I mean, do you spoil yourself with a little treat here and something that's less than healthy over there?
Yeah. You know what? Usually it's a list that I've been given from Sharon.
That's what I'm saying. Break free.
But sometimes, I'll go on my own just because, I need ibuprofen bad,
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. After these long road trips, I'm like,
yeah.
I'm out. I need some help.
I'm putting up with Thurl the way you have to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a headache right there.
So what do you buy?
It's whatever. Sometimes I'll see a special on Cheetos. And I haven't had had the puffy Cheetos in a while.
Okay.
And 2 bags, $5.49 with the card. With
sure.
my card.
Yeah.
So I'll say, what the heck? I'm taking them. I'll leave one in my office, and then just throw one in the kitchen. Yeah.
You know what I got today that I've never bought before?
Can't wait to hear
it. Yeah.
Hairspray.
Those what do you call those little potato puff things? Like in Napoleon Dynamite that he was putting in his
Tater tots?
Tater tots.
Potato puff things. That's not even a hard thing to pull. Tater tots.
Look,
what do you call when you cut the
tots.
potatoes in little slits and you fry them? What do you call those?
Do you understand that you have to warm those up, Gordo? You just can't open the bag and eat them.
I know.
Okay.
I do
all
know
right.
that.
Yeah. Okay.
In fact, we got one of those doodads that air fryer things.
Doodad.
You can use the air fryer to make some tater tots.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it looks like you're smashing a Budweiser right in front of
It
me.
does.
But it's
I know.
apple beer.
Really, do you think people would judge me?
I wouldn't.
No, man.
I can't speak for the community.
If it's 5 o'clock, I'd say right on, but it's 3:07, so I thought maybe a little early, but that's okay. It's 5 o'clock someplace. And I see ice in it. The first thing I thought of was the great late Jerry Sloan, who liked to throw a few ice cubes in a cold Bud Light.
Really?
Yeah.
One of my jobs when I was the PR intern for Dave Allred and Kim Turner's, I had to keep 6 beers back for Hot Rod and 2 beers back for Jerry. Because in the media room back in the day, they had beers.
They did. Absolutely.
Not any longer. I wouldn't judge you, but I think there's a portion of our community that's been enjoying your recent work with the Trib that might judge you a little bit if you're smashing beers.
I think that I'm doing that. Well, look, if that's your thing, then go for it. But I'm just saying, when I walked in here, there was a police officer driving by, and would that be illegal?
Yeah, you would be right. That's called an open container. And I could go down all the laws if you want to. We can dissect every single one of them.
In Vegas, you'd be fine.
Can you imagine getting an alert on your phone that Monson's been detained for an open container in downtown Salt Lake?
That's a headliner.
I would not believe that to be true for a second.
But if I had this, Spence, and it was filled up, because it started up here.
Yeah.
If it's filled up there and it's got the foamy head on it and all that stuff.
Don't say foamy head.
Would a police officer?
Yes, I think a cop would inquire as to what the beverage was in your plastic cup there.
I don't know if they have like a little steri strip they may have put in there to see if it reacts to it.
Well, and also, since you're new to the game, red plastic cups.
Yeah,
the
you
red
can't
Solo
do clear.
Cup. That's why everybody has the red Solo cups.
Okay,
right?
okay, because I had one of those at home I could have used.
See, this is a giveaway.
Well, it's also apple beer. You're fine. Clear or red plastic.
So
or you had to go, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It does also look like that. Caught off guard. Bowler, welcome back to civilization,
great
friend.
to be here. You know,
shouldn't be wearing socks, Bowler.
Really?
Yeah, wouldn't that complete it if he would?
If I was in Miami like I was like 5 days ago, should have just worn no socks. And we did Big T's idea. We just went the Don Johnson Miami Vice look, no tie, which felt good for a change, actually.
Did you go down to South Beach?
Yeah, we actually did. Yeah, not much. It rained the entire, a little. No, that was New York. I get mixed up where I am sometimes. Miami was beautiful. Orlando was very nice as well. But to Spence and I, we were talking earlier, I mean, the schedule has been insane. And we hit the road again for a quick trip to Phoenix, and then we come back and head to New Orleans. And by the middle of January, man, we've put some miles on those airplanes. Let me tell you that
Greg,
right now.
this is the time of year, because I did pre-aff and post for 7 years, and even because I never traveled, we were at the arena,
and that was taxing enough.
But no, this is the time of year where you walk out of the arena, and for me, it was like 1:30 a.m. And you're just like, dude, I don't care if you're a coach, a player, or a broadcaster. This is the time of year where you lose track of the days and like where you're at.
Here's the biggest thing that happens to me: what side of the bed do I get off and out of? Okay, I mean, it's weird. I wake up and I go, I am totally lost. I don't know if people who travel a lot feel the same way.
You don't know what city you're in?
The thing I've been trying to do is make sure, as you get older, you say, I can handle it. But one night, I remember on this last road trip, I stayed in room 917. The next night, I was in 719. You see? Oh. So, okay, all of a sudden, my mind flashes back to the 9th floor or am I on the 7th floor?
Yeah.
And you go, crap. So you go up to the 7th floor and you throw your card across a little... if it doesn't beep or go click, click.
Just start knocking loud.
Yeah, then I go back up to the 9th floor and try it again. So that's what I did.
Well, I'm glad you're back.
It's good to be back, guys. I love the studio. This is where it all starts. This is where it is.
I got to ask a quick question about this travel thing. Spence, you remember back when people were telling us that Carl had in his contract that he had to have a couple baskets of fresh fruit in his hotel room?
Yeah.
Was that true?
I don't know. It was one of those old tales.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, if you hear rock stars only have green M&Ms, right, in the green room or whatever. I mean, everybody has this, oddity that they like.
Do you have anything that you have here?
Are you kidding me? They would laugh me right through. Like, Bowler Jack wants what? Yeah, right.
Do you ever raid the bar? The mini bar?
I try to stay away from that.
Isn't it like $200 if you ate a bag of potato chips?
It's not $200 for a bag of potato chips, but it's not economic.
It depends on what city. If you're in San Antonio versus New York, if you're in Sacramento versus Miami, it is a night and day price difference. Oh. Night and day.
So people wonder this, Spence. You drive this boat.
No, you're good.
I think people wonder. Spence, all right. Yeah, you're good.
No. Yeah. But we got an hour here. We're fine.
Oh, okay. What are the players? What is their situation from city to city? Is it posh? Is it just routine? Is it what are their accommodations?
Well, it's nice. According to the NBA Players Union, I do believe hotels are in the 5-star category.
Okay.
That's part of the contract. Yes, per diem. Yes, food at their disposal. in the hotels. But I'll be honest with you. All the years I've traveled, I really think that it's a routine that everyone has to decide on how to do it themselves and what works for you. I mean, T has told me in the older days, because they used to play back-to-back-to-back. There were some days in the Sloan era especially, but the back-to-backs are rough. I mean, there's naps. I mean, it sounds crazy for young men to say it's nap time, but I think you have to catch your best rest whenever you possibly can, and it depends on your body. Some sleep on the flight. Some stay busy with whether it's movies or looking at game film, honestly. And others I think try to just chill.
The players watch what they eat. Who was the player, Spence, who used to eat the cheeseburgers?
That was Mel Turpin.
Dinner Bell Mel.
Yeah.
I thought there was another one. God, I'm forgetting his name right now. But he ate like a teenager.
But I don't think the NBA, any training staff in the league now would allow that. At least in the sense of them presenting to that on the flight or in a hotel gathering where they get together for team meetings and then they have a meal. There's no way, unless they jump out on their own and go to Smashburger. I don't know. Maybe once in a while they do. Maybe they got to treat themselves on occasion.
Let me ask you this, because I love that Gordon asked if NBA players stay in nice. It's like a La Quinta with Jimmy John's for lunch.
Yeah.
Of course they stay in nice hotels.
I knew they stayed in a nice hotel, but
they got the free breakfast buffet in the morning. Yeah, the buffet.
How accommodating.
Made to order
is.
pancakes.
Walker just nailed 1,000 Marriott points so he can get some milk in the morning. Give me a break. But I am curious. As only Gordon can do, Gordon does bring up an interesting topic. I wonder how it's changed, because I think it was Wickerstram, somebody about 5 years ago, because I can remember doing post-game, my final year doing post-game with Britain, and we would notice it was a Warriors game, and there were about 6 or 7 young ladies in the arena just sitting there, and we're kind of like, what's going on here? Like, how'd they get in? And Klay Thompson walks out, and all 6 or 7 of them just follow Klay out back, and they
disappear into the night.
Well, I didn't follow them. I don't know where they went. But the piece that Wickerstram wrote, he called it the Tinderification of the NBA. Whereas back in the day, like Gordon was talking about, and I saw this, in my own travels, but you've traveled with the teams more than I have. Players get done with a game, go back to the hotel, and then they're out. They go to the club, right? They want to meet women. They want to hang out. And that was kind of the deal. And now with dating apps, they land and boom, you're swiping and, a girl sees Klay Thompson matched with me on Tinder, so I'm going to go meet him after the game. They don't have to go out the way they used to if they want to meet women. And also, there's a little bit more of an understanding of how to take care of yourself because of the implementation of strength and conditioning coaches, nutritionists, like teams. They don't want these 21, 22-year-old players going out and smashing tequila shots. No. I think they take care of themselves better now in a way they didn't back in the day.
I would agree that there's more on the line today than ever, because they make it very clear in the NBA and the rookie symposiums that are held. Look, here's the way you're supposed to act, and the team also expects the same thing.
But at what point is an intrusion into privacy? Because
no, it's a great point. You still have your private life, right?
It was Tom Haberstroh who wrote that piece. My bad.
Tom Haberstroh.
Yeah, who wrote the piece about the Tinder use in the NBA.
But I remember one time at Marina Del Rey, we were staying at a hotel there, and the team hotel was next door.
The Ritz.
And you've been there many times. And the Jazz are in the playoffs, and there was a certain Jazz player who was checking his cousin into the hotel right when a few of us media people walked
checking
up,
in too,
and he was checking her in, and he happened to also be married at the time, and he was checking this cousin in, and it was just really kind of weird because it was like, okay, it's really none of our business what so and so is doing, but that's what he was doing.
How do you know it wasn't his cousin?
We were pretty sure.
Well, can't people have attractive cousins?
Could be a sister.
That's a dangerous question in Utah.
Yeah, true.
Could be a sister.
Your point is well taken.
I don't want to jump to a conclusion, but we kind of did.
I think we're already there.
I think the bottom line to it is that there is space that men live and women who travel in the WNBA or whatever, there still is a privacy. I think the players respect that, the coaches, as long as it doesn't impact the team concept of winning and moving forward. I tell you what, there's some nights at 3 o'clock you just don't. I can't say it, but you know what I'm talking about. You just want to go to get your butt upstairs, throw your 60-pound bag that you've been on the road for 7 days, and just try to find some sleep. And
I think this particular Jazz player, just wanted to take a little comfort.
Not a pillow, huh? But
look,
does it happen? Sure. I mean, but is this exclusive to the NBA? No. I mean, business trips, whatever you may, you can break it down however you want. But look, traveling is, in my opinion, still difficult mentally, physically, and if you're making the kind of money that is in the NBA, the National Football League, hockey, baseball, there is so much at stake now, even more, that if you want to stay in this league, and they're pushing you every day because there's somebody else rumored to be on their way. And so I think the pressure of just being who you are and for 6 months, that's your job. Obviously, you work out during the off season, and you may go overseas, you may play in summer leagues or whatever it may be, but man, you've got to be uber focused.
Especially with a team like the Jazz, because
you want to play hungover? I can't imagine.
Well, I mean, if you're a star, if you're an established star, then people aren't going to really question you about what your routine is. But if you're in the Jazz situation and you're trying to prove yourself and you're trying to improve as you do it, if I were one of those guys, I wouldn't be messing around.
I wouldn't do a thing, man. I would play ball, sleep, and eat. Play ball, sleep, and eat. As they say, you're living in the tube, which means the bus, the arena, the hotel, and the plane. That's it. That's it. That's your life. And the money you make is the reward. And right now, the Jazz especially, there's a lot of players out there that are still unknown in their own minds or their contracts, and their agents are trying to make sure that they live to play another day. Because I loved your interview with Tony coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Tony's spot on. I mean, there's a lot of ifs. There's a lot of players that are potentially ready to be drafted that could easily jump in and take a place or two of multiple Jazz players. And over this next 3 years, man, you got to be solid if you're going to survive Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck.
Do you remember Ron Fellows?
Ooh,
yes.
Name sounds familiar.
Defensive back for the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm almost certain my memory might be playing a trick on me, but I was
could be the beer.
I was I was interviewing him about Manny Hendricks.
Oh, Manny.
The former Ute basketball player who was trying to make the jump to the NFL.
That's right.
And the Cowboys were having their training camp out at Thousand Oaks, and I went out there and to do something on Manny. And I was talking to Ron, and he's an established player in the NFL. And I'm asking him, tell me about Manny Hendricks. And he said, well, I don't want to give him too much glory or pub because I don't want my job taken away. That was the first thing he said.
Yeah. Think about Keontae. He's looking over his shoulder, looking at a kind of a bulldog athletic point guard in Isaiah Collier, right? How does he develop?
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, man, I've got my own worries in year two. And, or Sensabaugh all of a sudden starting to look like a number 6 player, or he's got a body like a D. Wade, where he can plow in and get things done. He may actually turn out, Spence, to be a good finisher at the rim. Of course, he has to learn how to play defense or continue to improve there. But, man, there's all of a sudden, since we've talked, in studio, there's been an acceleration of development with the team. And I probably would say the Hawks' loss was as entertaining as we've had all season long on a Trae Young heave-ho after Sexton goes crazy with the tie, and you go, wow, did they grow up a lot tonight? But they still suffered the loss, and I know no one wants – well, some Jazz fans want to lose, and I get it. But for me, it was like, wow, a lot accomplished tonight. Incredible minutes, closing minutes, tight minutes against a team that has a really outstanding player too, actually. But Trae Young's good, man.
When Sexton hit that three, I just saw, okay, there it is.
Yeah.
And next thing they turn around and Trae hits that. I texted Quinn and said, what was that? And he texted me back and said, crazy stuff. Can't make this up.
Yeah.
It's just I don't care what the situation is. I don't care what the Jazz are trying to do, whether they're trying to win or trying to lose. That was a great game.
Yeah.
That was a fun game to watch.
The last 10 I think, Spence, and you're probably looking at them right now, I think have been competitive. I think we've seen growth. I've seen more confidence in this team. Will Hardy's a good coach, and the players are connected. And, that's part of the whole process. You talk about building the foundation, the winning culture. I think the culture, the bricks are starting to pile up a little bit. And, a month ago, I don't think we could have said that. But I think over the last 10 games, yes.
Yeah, and it's funny. I texted Quinn after the game. I said, hey, hell of a play call. And he said, better to be lucky than good. But that was a fun night. And I do think, okay, so we'll do this topic, then we'll catch a break. Because I was thinking about, because I've been watching Cleveland. I watched the Cavs OKC game last night. And Donovan is starting to really understand. Yeah. His numbers are about the same. He didn't shoot it well last night. But if you watch the way he's participating in the team offensive flow, and he's playing defense. He actually said not too long ago, I'm actually trying on defense now. And I'm like, thanks, dude.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
You were here for 5 years.
Yeah, what happened to the other
Suddenly
5,
his team's
man?
32-4.
But I was thinking about through this prism because I can remember Donovan's rookie year when he just, remember, Gordon leaves and everybody said, okay, they'll be okay because Rodney Hood is going to step in and take Gordon's usage. And honestly, Rodney had shown a little ability, so it's like, all right, let's see if Rodney is ready for that challenge. Within 5 games, it's like he's not.
Yep.
He's not that dude. Maybe he can be a role player that can hit some shots. And Quinn said to Donovan, all right, you're driving the car now. Threw him the keys, boom, rookie takes over. And then the second year, Donovan's second year, watching that playoff run, where Donovan was the main scoring option for a team that advanced a couple of rounds. They beat OKC. Yeah. Right? OKC was supposed to be that super team. And I remember thinking, this is such great news because for a second-year player to have playoff experience as the guy that's leading the charge in 4, 5, 6 years, it's going to pay off. Now, unfortunately, it's paying off for the Cavs. But I've been thinking, for a team that has no playoff basketball in their future, how are we going to get some of these young kids experience in intense game situations if they're not going to have playoff experience like Donovan did as a young player? Because the experience you have in year 1, year 2, year 3 manifests year 4, year 5, year 6. This is a rite of passage league. So the fact that over the past 10, 12 games, they've had a couple of wins here or there, but these games are close down the stretch, and it's intense, and it's good basketball against good teams. These are the games that you want Keontae in. I know he's been and out, but you want Kyle in, you want Isaiah in. You want the young players to feel what it's like to play intense minutes in intense situations. And if it's not going to be playoff basketball, this is the second best thing.
Exactly. I thought the same thing down those last 4.5 minutes was like, wow, this is what, players, fans all wanted to see, all want to live for. And it is a replica. It's the best replication of a playoff feel, Gordo. I mean, you can't replicate that until you live it because there is another level, but this is as close as you can get. And also, who closes those minutes? Will Hardy is using 10-player rotations mostly. He's letting a lot of guys get a lot of minutes, but Cody Williams is in there. Sensabaugh's been in there when he hasn't been ill. Keontae has been there, and Flip has had some moments as well. So how do you do it? You have to throw them into a situation that they go, man, this feels good. I don't like to lose, but boy, it felt good to get to this point. What do I have to do now to get to the next level? And so it's a process, but I hold true. The last 10 games, man, I just get a total sense of more confident Utah Jazz team who seem to be handling situations much better. Turnovers are down a bit, but they still come back to bite them in just stressful times where they haven't been. And they seem not to know exactly what to do or if they trust themselves or their teammate.
So if I were going to ask the both of you, one conclusion, I know we're really not in the conclusion business right now with that team, but based on the last 10 games, if you had to come up with one conclusion about what's happening with the Jazz, what would you say?
In a way, it reminds me of the early part of Quinn's tenure here, where early on, rebuild – team wasn't winning, but you could see this guy can coach. Will can coach.
Yeah.
And so even on nights in Orlando, they sat half the team. Will's like, whatever, let's just go win the thing. He maximizes the talent on that roster. Yeah. And I really hope that in the next 2 years he sees enough to stick around for the long term. Because I remember thinking before Dennis was able to, be really savvy and a little lucky with Donovan and Rudy, right? But other additions, Ingles, Pops, like nobody thought he would. Then Quinn had a team. I'm like, all right, Quinn is good here. But I remember thinking, like, if Dennis doesn't get Quinn players, Quinn's going to get gone. And I just hope that they can give Will enough talent at his disposal that in 2 years from now he sees enough to stay. Because I think he could coach pretty much anywhere in the league. I think it'd be a hot commodity if he doesn't stick around here.
He deserves it.
Yeah. No, I mean, he comes from, the Popovich tree, and he's obviously well-trained, learned, watched, listened, started in the film room like Spoelstra with Pat Riley in Miami. There's a lot of comparisons there. But again, how long, you asked Tony this too, Spence, what's the runtime here of actually being a dynamic playoff team in the West, which is aging, which will help the Jazz in a lot of ways. But what if you finish with the 5 spot and maybe Lady Luck doesn't fall on you like it did with Atlanta? Now, Ricochet, for a number 1 pick, I'm not real sure where that is, but the next 2 years, there's some home runs out there to hit. And where are the Jazz? And the other part of this equation is, does Zanuck and Danny do what they've done the last 2 years and move players prior to the trade deadline? And that is yet to be seen if that would really then push the Jazz back down from where they are right now and open up more minutes for even Flip and for Cody and others.
I don't think they'll do anything. I actually think, look, if a GM calls and says, I'll give you first for Clarkson, they'll take it.
Yeah.
Or,
John Collins.
Yeah. And maybe they can get a first for a vet. But it almost feels like they're built perfectly to stay competitive but continue to lose. And that, I know it sucks, but that's kind of what you want.
Delta Center still, I got to applaud Jazz fans. It's still, wow. They walk in, they want to see this rebuild. They're there. And I wasn't sure if that would be the case this season. But I think they do see what we see, and that is some young players who have some excitement to them. And, it's a wait-and-see game to see exactly how long it'll take.
Can I use one analogy? I look at it like this. I think that the Jazz are putting a puzzle together. Only, what's the first thing you do when you're doing a 5,000 piece?
Don't you want to
find something else to do?
Border
it sucks. It's so boring.
Is it a 5,000 piecer we're doing here?
Recalibrate my life choices.
Talking about?
Don't you do the border on a puzzle?
Yes.
Yeah.
You do the border, but the Jazz are doing the middle first.
Building out.
Yeah, because they don't have the framework.
That makes it tougher.
Well, we started out the segment with cooking potato puffs in the GoDaddy instead of
and
tater
an apple
tots.
Beer, and we're talking puzzles.
He literally called tater tots potato puffs. He's a 65-year-old man. What's going on? All right, we'll catch a break. We're going to do some football coming up next. Penn State, Notre Dame tonight. And since we last spoke, big-time transfer heads down to Provo. Gordon Monson, Craig Bullerjack live in the studio. Gordo's almost done with his beer. So keep it here on ESPN 700. Gordon Monson, Craig Bowlerjack live in studio. We got another big segment here before we bring in Ted Robinson to preview tonight's Notre Dame-Penn State game. Interesting conversation during the break. I think it's probably appropriate and fair to say we should all be very grateful for this time and where we find ourselves existing in society.
Yes, I would agree with that 100%. And I wish, this has been something in my 30 years of doing radio. Sometimes I think the breaks are more interesting than what we say on the air. Mm-hmm. I wish all of your listeners could have heard the story Craig just told. I mean, anyway, yeah, I agree with you 100%. Yeah, when you see what's happening down in Southern California right now, people losing their homes, people in tough circumstances. It doesn't be grateful for the good things. You know?
Yeah, I think we've lost track of that. Not to preach, but I hope everybody just takes a deep breath on occasion and just understands what really is going down. You lose a president and Jimmy Carter, half staff, flags, a new president inauguration around the corner. You've got fires. It's a crazy world, man.
Make the best of it.
I don't understand. You know more about that, Gordo. You live there. But the Santa Ana winds, they always fear that. Mm-hmm. They always fear the Santa Ana winds, and it can just – those things roar like 40 to 60 miles an hour, right? Or more?
Oh, more.
And
it can be more.
It's its own weather system. Yeah. And so once a fire picks up, and they haven't had much rain, if any, in the last 3 years in SoCal, so it's prime picking.
I talked to a friend of mine last night, and he sent me 4 or 5 videos. He drove around my old neighborhoods. I had 2 different houses down there. One of them's gone. The other one made it through. And I'm like, he's showing me what's going on. And I'm like, and people, I heard one person say, isn't it a coincidence that there was a fire and the wind just happened to be blowing at that time? And I said, no, because there could be a fire when the Santa Anas aren't roaring and they just put it out. But in this case, that wind picks up those embers and they are flying all over the place. And next thing you know, your city's burning down. It's crazy.
It's horrifying, man. It looks like apocalyptic out there. But there was this, let's see here. Let me give this guy the proper credit. So David Bornstein is his name, and he's the co-founder of a organization called the Solutions Journalism Network. And he wrote an op-ed for the New York Times 2 years ago and said, "Scared by the news, ? Take the long view. Now's the greatest time in history to be alive." But the problem is we're all consuming fear-based, propaganda and for-profit news that doesn't give a rip about truth. They want to scare you so you keep consuming. And if you get lost in the cycle about who's going to be president and then half the country hates that candidate and suddenly we're on the precipice of a civil war, you lose track of the long game, which is truly this is the best time in human history to be alive. And I think it's important to keep reminding people of that because it does feel like life is so hard for so many people right now, and I'm not sure how necessary that is if you just reframe your thinking.
The truth does get lost, and that's a scary thing. When the truth doesn't matter anymore, when it comes to government and other things, then you've got a bit of a problem that needs to be handled. But you're right, Spence. When you think of the advances in – I hear people complain about doctors, and they complain about this. When you think about the advances in medicine – and how it's helping people live rich lives, and I'm not talking about financially, they're just being able to live. We do live in a fantastic time, and people used to ask me this all the time. They say, man, the news is so negative all the time. I get it. I get what you're saying. But the very definition of news is that which is extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And so if the bad news is extraordinary, when it get really bad is if the good news is extraordinary, and that's what's being portrayed. And so take some optimism out of that. Be Paul McCartney and say everything is getting better, not John Lennon. It couldn't get no worse.
I pick up this phone, Spence, and I think, God, what an incredible development this was. Mm-hmm. What are we on, the iPhone 16 going on 17? I don't use half of whatever's on this thing. I don't have any need for it, but you can become addicted to it, and everyone has a voice, but now it's heard more than ever. Mm-hmm. We just grew up in an era with Gordo and I where, of course, we sat down and watched 2 newscasts, the 6 and 10, in the old days, or the 5:30 national news with the Cronkite and others.
I miss Walter.
Yeah, and those are early memories for me. But there was no other way to get news. But now news is so fast and current. The 6 and 10 is old news, and so now they do more local. But I think that's something that you can almost become addicted to, is the negativity that you see on your phone every day in so many different areas of communication. So you have to decide for yourself. And I've decided to kind of let it just sit down a little bit more, to be honest with you, because when I'm on the road, my office is the plane, my office is my hotel room. And sometimes, after my 5th run of MASH or Gilligan's Island, I've got to do something else. So I pick this up and go, no, that can't be right. And and people everyone has their own opinion about every subject that's out there.
Yeah. I read somewhere where there's more computing power in that phone you just picked up than the computers
Apollo.
that put the men on the moon.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah, we could do hours and hours on this topic, to your point about progress in medicine. I mean, our life expectancy has gone up over the past 150 years because we've learned how to eradicate diseases through science.
This body's only made to last 50.
And then,
I swear.
And then ultimately,
I got knees and artificial this and you know what I mean? It's amazing.
COVID gets politicized and we forget, no, we need to keep eradicating diseases through science. That's why we're living longer than we ever have. Interesting enough, though, life expectancy for white men in America has actually gone down since COVID.
Apple beer.
What's the
apple beer? Yes.
What's the explanation for that?
I think there are a lot of lonely,
pressure,
disenfranchised, middle-aged men that don't have life partners, that don't have things to get them out of bed every day that excite them. They probably thought they were going to be presidents of companies, and now they're barely hanging on. And so there are things out there that indicate people, I think, are just thinking the wrong way, though. That's why this piece where it's keep the long game in mind. This is an excellent time to be alive. Not enough people, I think, fully embrace that.
I love what your message there is, Spence. I couldn't agree with you more. Even though we get the extraordinary, we get so much of the bad news, it really is probably the best time ever to be alive.
I'm going to send you this op-ed. I think you'd like it.
Yeah, as far as opportunity, as far as health, as far as maybe some degree of open-mindedness, at least in some camps, and the opportunity to be what you want to be, if you're willing to pay the price, and if you do have the original opportunity from jump. Because if you don't have that opportunity, then you can be stepped on your whole entire existence.
And one last thought, I think you have to force yourself to, Spence and Gordo, to actually control your own narrative, because you can actually become overwhelmed with negativity. And, why do some white men don't make it as long as what the norm is? If that's, with the study you just said, is that you become depressed. You only look at the negative, and if you're that negative in life, then it draws you down. Your health is impacted by it as well. Mental health is a key here. Mm-hmm. That's my point. Mental health is something, if you have a friend, if you know someone that needs to talk, I think it's uber important to try to offer that type of help or someone to talk with and guide them to the right people.
Well, I think I have a good idea about your entire background. I could get you in a whole lot of trouble.
Yes, you could.
I know so much about you.
Yeah.
Spence, same thing with you. And when I look at you guys' lifeline and how you've sort of gone through and overcome certain challenges. And look, I'm not saying that oh boy, you guys had it so rough from the beginning, but you have had your rough spots and you overcame them through some degree of positivity. If you weren't an optimist, Spence, some of the challenges that you've overcome are unbelievable. It's a great story. And same thing with you, Bowler. And so if there's a message in this for all your listeners out there, Spence, I hope they hang on and keep climbing and keep working towards something positive, because you can make a difference in this world. You can do. Oh, boy, I sound like a Baptist preacher.
You do, amen. It's a revival here, here on 700.
I like the new approach, Gordon.
Yeah.
I told you my one resolution.
Well, it's still the first week of January.
It's like water. You know what I just thought of? It's like Waterboy when he says the play, no, the day.
Yes, there we go.
See, think about that. Live to play another day.
Yeah.
So if you're down, you just have to remember tomorrow you continue on.
Perfect.
Well said. Last thing here, and then we'll move on entirely. But I find this really fascinating because the leading cause of death for middle-aged white men, it's still heart disease. But number 2 is accidental deaths, meaning suicide, addiction-related overdoses. Wow. That's now number 2. Wow. You know, so you have a lot of depressed, like lonely men out there right now that they just get lost in their mind.
What's the answer?
Well, number 1, recognize that your mind lies to you. Your mind is constantly barking at you about things that aren't true.
Constantly, yes.
There's a difference between thinking and thoughts. Thoughts are the things that just come in when you're just sitting there and like, oh, you're a piece of, you did this.
And
you can combat that with positive thinking, but it takes practice.
The thing I've learned is that everyone has just the odd thought that, when you're growing up, you just think that life is just, you're out on the playground having a good old time playing baseball, but then you hit the real reality of life and you think, oh, wonder why that popped into my head. What that was kind of strange.
A dumb thought.
Yeah, a dumb thought,
yep.
But it happens and people can sit on it and just, I think, become obsessed with that.
And that's why you just observe it and let it go.
Let it go if you can.
You can't get lost in the mind because then it goes like this.
I think that all 3 of us have been extremely fortunate in our lives, but we've also overcome some things that people may not know about. And I love it when people say, hey, always remember that the guy you're talking to or the guy sitting next to you, you don't know what his problems are.
What I've learned, everyone has a story.
Yeah.
Everyone has a story. Every person in the arena that you said to, everyone is going through something, and they're really good at hiding it. And you're lucky enough if you can find 1 or 2 friends along the way that you can actually trust and open up, and maybe they give you some ideas to either alleviate or find answers to some of those stresses that everybody takes every day.
Well, I think your listeners,
and I'm still working hard on mine.
Exactly.
I mean, look, it never ends. You just kind of find ways to say, okay, progress. I get it. I get it. I understand.
I have made a profession out of expressing opinion, but also interviewing people to tell their stories. And Bowler, I did that to you.
Yes, you did.
And we got into all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But did I make you uncomfortable with that?
No. You know what? I need to talk about those things as I get older.
It's a great story. And people look at you and say, oh, he's got it made. Look at what he's doing. Wouldn't that be a great job to have? They have no clue what you've overcome in your life. And Spence, same thing with you. And this is interesting because when I've interviewed people over the last 50 years, a lot of times they think, oh, I don't have anything really interesting to say about myself. I'm telling you, almost everyone listening to your show right now, Spence, you have a story to tell, and you have an interesting story to tell, and you have a worthwhile story to tell. But people don't give themselves enough credit, I think, for what they've been able to do.
Yeah. Well, and when you share it, it empowers others to help. And I will say before we move on to a little football with a few minutes left, like just know that you're not alone in struggles and in sadness and in loneliness, and ignore those dumb thoughts, man. Let them go and get back to center and just get through another day.
And ignore the criticism that comes from the guy behind the hill.
It doesn't matter.
Look, I know it's sports talk radio, but I hope that if we touch one person in this 20-minute segment, then that's a good thing for this day.
100%. I'm with you.
One person, if we just made one person think differently or say, you know what, I'm going to make a conversation about this, or I'm going to go look and find somebody that can help, then amen, we did the right thing today. Sometimes, I get people, you guys get off topic and stuff. Yeah, but you know what? We're just talking life sometimes too, and I like that.
And I'm on air for 4 hours, so you can stay tuned for sports for the other 3 hours and 40 minutes, so everybody calm down. But let me get both your opinions on this, and I think I've talked to you both separately about the dynamic, but with the few minutes we have left, let's get into this, Keanu Tanavasa, who is a professional football player. He's going to play in the NFL.
Absolutely.
And he's awesome. And if you're a Ute fan and you're following the news and you see that, Mekhi Pittman enters the transfer portal, you're like, all right, dude, high five, good luck. But then you see that Keanu does and you go, oh, man, that hurts. And then you see he goes to BYU, and that hurts even worse. I'm happy for Kalani and Jay to get this kid who's a stud and also seems like a good kid. But the way he announced it was interesting because he took a lot of heat because Keanu went at Cameron Calhoun, who Cameron said, a Utah man am I. And then Kalen DeBoer said, well, do you want to check out Tuscaloosa? He's like, okay, that sounds good. So he goes down to Bama, and Keanu kind of cracked on him on social, and he sends out Utah man am I, and then boom, deletes the tweet 2 days later. And I was told he told the Utah coaches 2 weeks before we found out. He heads down to Provo, releases a scripture. His father is very active on social, which I didn't know this, and he said, when the heavens open, our family listens. And I was told Keanu told the Ute coaches, God wants me in Provo. What do you say to that? You know, like what? I'm not saying he's using it as a smokescreen. And, you know, this is the unique dynamic with Brigham Young and Utah and the religious, like, undertones of the football rivalry. But there are a lot of things like, oh, what's the number? Okay, help us. We can maybe meet this with NIL. Okay, what are they promising you? Okay, we can send you the NFL as well. But when someone says, like, this is God's will, what do? You just give them a high five and send them. There's nothing you can really say to it.
No, I mean, you know, look, Kyle Whittingham, former BYU player. So, you know, he understands probably better than the three of us. Gordo, you'll understand it better than I do. I'm the outsider here, growing up in the Midwest. And I remember coming here in '85 trying to figure out, the BYU-Utah rivalry, man, this is a little odd, but interesting, but intense. Yeah, this one's interesting. There's not much you can say, Spence, I don't think.
I would say this about that. Everyone has to make their own mind up about what's most important for them. But you can find God at Utah just as well as you can at BYU. I mean, it's not as much out there and straight in your face, but the largest LDS institute in the world is sitting up on the hill on Utah's campus. So, I mean, you can find that if that's what you're looking for. Typically, when I hear that, I think, okay, there are other factors as well. There's something going on here, and I'm not discounting him, his feeling religiously at BYU, whatever. I'm not saying he doesn't feel that, but there are other things as well. And he talked about the coaching. I mean, he said that the coaches at BYU would love him even if he sucked. He didn't use those words, but he essentially said
the only
that.
thing that pops.
Does that mean that Kyle would have been all over? What? I don't know what that means, but it spoke to him personally. Yeah. Whether God spoke to him, I don't know. But, you know, you got to follow your own heart. Yeah. And if that's what his heart's telling him, then go do it.
The only other thing that comes into play for me, guys, is that if there's other situations at hand at both schools that impacts those decisions. What I mean by that is the future of Utah football, Witt and the length of time he stays, that he knows more than others, and that the feel-good feeling is gone, and BYU's on the upswing, and, you know, this is the time. But I'm with you. If you feel like that the heavens, as his dad said, has opened and spoken, what do you say to that? I mean, it's like go with your heart, I guess, right? And in this world we're living today, the portal, the NIL money, all those things, are those trickle-down effects as well? Who knows? And you know what? It's hard to – I guess counter that with other, you know, like, oh, was it cash only? Was it, you know, is it plain opportunity? What could it be? But if the young man says it's, you know, that's what the good man wants, then so be it, and shake his hand and say good luck.
Do you think God cares?
That's
Spence, here we go, buddy.
Here we go. This has been a question that I get asked constantly because it's very in the forefront of sports today. Interviews after games.
Boise State's coaching staff.
Yes.
Every one of them.
Quite intriguing.
Jesus.
Yes. And I don't know how that really settles in with most fans who watch football, because it's a violent-ass game, man. But then at the same time, you turn and praise your Heavenly Father for the victory. So what does he think about – and this is what I was going to – so he didn't like the opponent. That's always the counter to this. I think it's tough to intertwine it. You know, Tim Tebow really came out, remember, and was on the forefront of that as well. I think he had underneath his eye, wasn't the sticker, was the Psalms. Mm-hmm. And I
was it John 3:16? I don't know.
John, was it what? Yeah,
I'm not
Psalms, sure. John, yeah. But I think it's really interesting to see how people react to that. And it's more of it's much more now happening in collegiate athletics. Not as much I see in pros, but on occasion, but a lot now in post-game comments. And I guess even on Sunday and Monday Night Football, same type of thing.
I always thought that when Tebow went into the end zone and took a knee and said a prayer, I'm a religious person, try to be, but that to me is the greatest form of smack talk that you can do, because you're essentially proclaiming to God, thank you for blessing me over the schmuck I just beat in the end zone.
Right, yeah.
And I don't like that.
That's a tightrope to walk, man.
I prefer to have it separate. Not because I think God, if you believe in God, okay, then God can bless your life. He wants you to live a happy, productive life, but he doesn't necessarily favor you over the guy you just beat.
Yeah. No, it's a great topic of conversation. And Spence, I got to applaud you, man. This show in 1 hour's time really goes back to Napoleon Dynamite and frozen tater tots and all the way to taking a knee.
Potato puffs in the
and taking a knee in the end zone, man.
Yeah,
Think about where we covered this today, man. It's the world of sport. Really, I think the lesson for me is it's all encompassing of us,
microcosm of life.
Of life, it is. We live for sport, competition, for the gladiators that we watch on the field at certain times, and then praise them, or they praise their God. It's fascinating to me, and it is what it is.
If you want to
take it as you like, I guess, as a consumer.
If you want to hear a good speech on this, listen to Steve Young. He's got some great deep thoughts on the value of sports and the relationship of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And he talks about Ronnie Lott and the lessons he taught Steve about the importance of what you're doing in the middle of competition, but not necessarily that I'm a winner and you're a loser. That's not the labeling that any kind of power up above would have in mind. But that's the way it's portrayed sometimes. And you want to end the show with saying, praise Jesus, Bowler?
Take a knee before the game tonight. Now, it's personal for me, but I feel very connected. But I just don't use that verbally in public. And again, that's something that again is a personal decision to do. And I try to respect that, but at the same time, I get pushback from fans who say that's a great thing, or that does not jive with the way that I live my life.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy a Trump Bible if you want.
So
and sneakers.
Yeah. But, that's where we are today. This is, again, is a microcosm of where we are in society today, very split on so many issues. And for us to come together and just talk about it's a good thing. And then you make your own decision. And if you want to get mad at Gordo or I or Spence, fine. But, everyone has an opinion about it. But it's right there for us all to consume and see. Do you agree with everything? No. But how do you accept it, I think, is probably the biggest challenge.
And certainly faith is an individual thing. And I'm not judging anybody for the way they decide to, express their faith. But sometimes when it's laid on super thick with the outcomes of games, I'm like, does God have like a 14 parlay that he needs one more to hit? Is he pulling up his DraftKings app? Like, I need Penn State to win tonight. Like, the way it's laid on sometimes is just like, I don't know. It's a little weird. But
you know what? That comment right there, that makes me laugh. Man, yeah, a 14 parlay going tonight, right?
So you mean that God isn't a Notre Dame season ticket holder?
Ooh.
Notre Dame tonight.
Notre Dame. Penn State.
Gentlemen,
Penn State's D, by the way, is pretty good.
Well, thanks for humoring me and leaning in a different direction.
Let's go get some tots, will you? Come on.
Apple
some
beer,
potato puffs.
Let's go get some puffs. What do you say? I got a microwave out here. Let's roll.
Always prefer it in studio. Great to see you guys.
Great to see you,
have
man.
a good call. Oh, by the way.
Jazz.
No, not Jazz. We are sitting next to the 3-time Utah Sports Broadcaster of the Year. Craig,
thanks,
congratulations.
Hey.
And while we're in the space real quick, shout out to clearly the best sports writer in the market, Sarah Todd, for winning her award as well.
First of all, I'll say it this way. That award, if that award was properly done, Bowler would have won it 10 times.
Okay.
Yeah. Kind of you, my friend. You know what? I work with some great people, and Trav.
My guy.
JB and Joe and Stoke and everybody. I've got great support. The Jazz have some great people that I work with, and I'm blessed. Thank you.
Have a great call.
Spence should get it one of these years.
Well, it's going to happen.
Oh, it's the Bowler every year, in my opinion.
No, it's going to happen, Spence.
Great to see you guys. Have a great call tonight, okay?
Appreciate you.
All right. Got to catch a break. Ted Robinson joins us coming up next right here on ESPN 700. All right, don't forget, you can hear the CFP semifinal at the Capital One Orange Bowl. Let's give the sponsor a shout-out tonight following the Craig Smith Coaches Show. Notre Dame, Penn State. And our next guest, I have to imagine, is excited for tonight's festivities. Uncle Ted, as he's known around these parts, the great Ted Robinson on a Thursday. Ted, happy Thursday, sir. How are you?
Well, it's great to be back with you. Happy New Year. And, yeah, I mean, it's nice to see. And, look, Penn State's a terrific school itself. So, and I think many of us, I guess you probably are not surprised to hear me say this, are very happy that the SEC is not involved because Texas is not the SEC, even though they're taking the money from it. It's been good. And you know what? The games last week actually ended up being pretty good. And I was happy for that because we all know the first week, that Friday, Saturday was not good.
Oh, for sure. And, you know, I do want to get to some macro takeaways, but since you are a proud Notre Dame alum, I wanted to have you on today to talk about what exactly would it mean for this institution and folks such as yourself that care about it if Notre Dame is not only able to win tonight, but go win their first national championship since, what, 1988?
Wow. Well, yeah, it would mean a ton, and I will always proclaim that Notre Dame won the national championship in 1993 since they beat Florida State head-to-head in November, and the two schools ended up with the same record. But back then, there was not a whole lot of love for Lou Holtz, and Bobby Bowden was beloved by the media, had never won the national championship, and so they gave it to him. And that's just the way it is. And that's why, you know, it's one of the many reasons why we eventually got to various forms of playoffs, is because that was just ridiculous. I mean, the two teams met head-to-head in November, not in week 0, and Notre Dame beat them, and you end up with the same record. That usually means the tiebreak, right? But that didn't happen that year. Anyway, what it would mean in the present day would be a lot. It would be confirmation for Marcus Freeman. I'm very open with the fact that I met Marcus Freeman once. I met him last year when Notre Dame played at Stanford, the final Pac-12 network football game. Very impressive. I'm thrilled for the university because it was way too long to have diversity in our coaching ranks. Being the preeminent Catholic university in the world, that should be something that is important to us. And we didn't practice it enough, in my view, until recently. And Marcus Freeman, even now, has gotten heat from alums because of some of the losses Notre Dame's had in its 3 years, including Northern Illinois this year. And I'm thrilled for the results because it just silenced all of that. Admittedly, Notre Dame didn't have the toughest schedule this year because the ACC wasn't great. USC was not great. So it wasn't the gauntlet that some of the SEC teams have to face. Let's be clear on that. But Notre Dame handled their business, and they handled it pretty well.
So James Franklin with some comments about his belief that every school should have should be in a conference. And Notre Dame has always been the one institution, the one brand that's been able to make this model work. And if they win the national championship, I think the check is $21 million, which goes to Notre Dame. They don't have to split it. To the winner goes the spoils. So help us understand, Ted, a little bit more as to why the independent dynamic is so important to the lifeblood of not just the football program, but the institution that is Notre Dame.
Okay, yeah, I don't know what I'm not familiar with James Franklin's comment there. I don't understand it as you related. I don't know what. First of all, it's none of his business. And secondly, I don't know why is there a constitutional mandate here that every school has to be a part of something. That doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. But anyway, having said that, let me say two things. One, Notre Dame is really part of a conference. They are in the ACC for every sport except hockey because the ACC doesn't play hockey. Notre Dame actually plays in the Big Ten, believe it or not, hockey conference. They're in the ACC for every other sport, and they play between 4 and 5 ACC games a year. That also means that when the ACC school plays at Notre Dame, that school is taking home a pretty nice TV paycheck as a visiting team on a national NBC telecast. So the one, or I should say the two elements that the independence means for Notre Dame, and it's only two, is the TV, the home television contract, only the home games, and secondly, it's scheduling. It enables Notre Dame to schedule probably a half a dozen games a year, including what they term the Shamrock Series, which means it's a neutral site game, usually in a big market in the country that has a lot of Notre Dame alums. And Notre Dame schedules one of those every year. That's the extent of their independence. So my point to you is it's vastly overrated. My second point would be, this was back in the late 90s probably, Jim Delaney opened the door for Notre Dame to join the Big Ten as the 12th member. I was very adamant within the Notre Dame world. I thought it was a great idea. I thought we belonged in the Big Ten for all of our sports. Women's sports were just growing. We were starting to develop Olympic sports. And to be in the Big Ten just made a ton of sense for all the apparent reasons. The Notre Dame faculty largely wanted that association. Most of the Big Ten schools, not the new Big Ten, but the original Big Ten schools, most of them are excellent academic schools. They're large state universities with good library systems, with good research programs, with medical schools, and Notre Dame's faculty wanted that association. At the end of the day, football independence won out, and that's how powerful it is in the Notre Dame world. That was the only reason Notre Dame turned down the Big Ten membership, and that has never come back, although I suspect it will someday, because I think it's known the Big Ten has clauses in their TV deals that would reflect adding Notre Dame, that would add a lot more money. So I'm assuming that somewhere down the line that opening will come up again for Notre Dame. I don't know how long it'll take, but I hope that Notre Dame join. Well, the Big Ten isn't the Big Ten anymore, so I have to revise that thought. But I've always thought the Big Ten, the core Big Ten, was a great place for Notre Dame to be.
Well, and excuse me, we could talk about what the Big Ten is right now, but we would probably have to recalibrate not too long after, because everything continues to change and ebb and flow, which allows me to transition into more of a macro question, because I keep using this line over the past few weeks, Ted, where I've just leaned into, from a sports radio approach, diagnosing and not prognosticating, because we're all learning this as we go. It's a new format. It's a new sport as far as your ability to have talent off the field with the transfer portal and the NIL situation. And of course, it's a 12-team expanded CFP, and all the conferences look much different than they did a year ago. Most of them do, as far as conferences adding teams. Several of the teams that you and I are familiar with as the Pac-12 crumbled. But since I haven't had a chance to catch up with you for a while, how do you feel about the current state of college football, the sport that we all love to consume?
Wow, that's a wide open palette there, Spence. So, I'll let me personalize this to my experience this football season. So the Pac-12 still existed in the form of two schools, as everyone knows. Those two schools did a television deal with the CW network, which is an over-the-air network. It has an outlet in, I think, just about every significant market in America. So the Washington State and Oregon State home games were aired all on the CW this year, and I was part of that package. The season began with a lot of hope for Oregon State. It quickly pivoted to Washington State, and I ended up doing 5 Washington State games. So being around the Cougar program a lot this year was the collision of where I think college sports are right now. It was an incredibly uplifting season for them. I am a huge fan of their head coach. I think Jake Dickert is terrific. And he's meant to be a coach, and he's only 41 years old. The quarterback story, having Cam Ward have this huge buildup in the 23 season and then basically fall flat. And the Cougars collapsed at the end of the year. Cam Ward collapsed. And then he ended up getting $1 million plus to go to Miami, which you saw what happened this year. So what's Washington State going to do a quarterback? Well, they had a kid from Texas who was under-recruited. He had been there for a couple of years, and it's his turn. And John Mateer made himself into a player that I actually put on my Heisman ballot this year. That's how good he was. The team, sadly, their defense was not good, and they collapsed in the last 3 games and took themselves out of, they were on the fringe of the playoff conversation. I would say no more than that. But just being there was a miracle, and sadly, they fell out the last 3 games. What happens? John Mateer goes to Oklahoma. Rumors are $3 million. Offensive coordinator goes to Oklahoma. And then Jake Dicker turns around and I would admit even stunned me, takes the job at Wake Forest. So this incredibly wonderful, uplifting story for the school that got left behind, the school that's out in the prairies, doesn't have wealthy rolls of alums, a lot of individuals who succeeded in farming and ag and business, but they chip in to a collective, and they have this wonderful season, and the program survives the first year of this anarchy, and then suddenly it collapses within a couple of days. So I'm uplifted, and then I'm really dismayed, because that's the point. And it's very obvious for everyone to see is that the Washington States right now and the Oregon States and other programs around the country are just farm teams. And until there's some order in all of this, and no one knows how that's going to happen, but until there is, this is the case. So to your question, that I hope that explains this internal collision I've experienced. I'm so happy to be part of that Washington State football season, and at the end you go, man, that's just a drag. That really stinks.
Yeah, from that vantage point, for sure. And there's nothing really to debate there because you're not wrong. And, from a local standpoint, Ted, it's interesting to see where Utah football finds themselves because, as you know, covering the program as part of the Pac-12 network, Coach Witt has built Utah football on the ethos of recruit and develop. That's how they do it. And they don't necessarily rely on a number of 4- and 5-star guys. They go find Utah guys, and then they bring them on campus. And over the course of a number of years, they basically indoctrinate them into the Kyle Whittingham way. His saying is, we will not become you, you will become us. And the most successful seasons in Utah football history have been with 3rd, 4th, 5th-year players that signed on the dotted line, often overlooked from other schools, came in and learned the Kyle way, put in the work, and at times it paid off with conference championships and Rose Bowl appearances. Can you build a football program in the modern day and age of college football with the ethos of recruit and develop over time anymore?
Yeah, hard. I mean, my initial answer is that, Spence, is really hard. I hope somebody does it. I'm trying to think of an example right now. I mean, we're sitting here waiting tomorrow night to watch Texas play, and here's Texas having its best football season in a long time, and everyone's talking about should the quarterback come back to Texas next year, or should he get a huge NIL deal to go to another school, which would likely pay more than he would make in his first NFL season. I mean, that's what I'm sorry, that's just lunacy when you think of what that means, but it is where the world is. And so I would take this, maybe if I can step macro on that question, Spence. Here's my concern, having raised kids and now raising grandkids. It's extremely wise to respect the fact that players, athletes now in the top college sports can earn. And I have no objection to that. I don't know that any smart-minded person has an objection to that. The way it's done, maybe that's where we would start to have some difference of opinion. And what I feel very strongly about is I fear that this generation, represented by these 18 to 25-year-olds and damn near 30-year-olds now, in some cases playing college athletics, are being raised and are living through an experience completely devoid of character, commitment. When a quarterback quits in the middle of a season, how many times did we see that in top-level college football this year, where a quarterback just quit? The quarterback of a football team. Is there any more leadership-demanded position in sport than quarterback in football? And you had several guys just quit in the middle of a season on their team. You referenced the Kyle phrase with the word us, and I'm very fearful from what I see in football and men's basketball. There's no us. It's I, me, I, me. And so the concept of an athlete being able to be compensated when everybody else around him is fine. We get that. To do it without character is really, that's long-term ramifications for us way beyond sport.
Well said. We'll end with, because I know you got to go, we'll end with your thoughts on, because the fact of the matter is, we can bellyache about the state of the sport, and then you just look at the ratings and the numbers, and people are consuming it at a historic level, and it happens to be a multi-billion-dollar business with a failed business model, which makes it probably very appealing to folks in the private equity world. And it does feel like we are in this like neoliberal capitalism type takeover of college athletes on the horizon now, and it feels like very powerful rich people are going to start to buy potentially college football programs. A lot of rumors already circulating that thing is going to happen, and it is inevitable. Is there part of you that is hopeful that at some point the business model of college football can be fixed to the level where most of the problems that are plaguing the sport can go away, and we can all kind of sit and enjoy whatever the final paradigm shift is with this sport, whenever that happens?
Yeah, Spence, I think the business model is in place. I don't think it will change. I mean, unless somebody else gets a case to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court has another, a Judge Kavanaugh-like decision that reverses things, I think we're way gone. It's professional. There's nothing college about the top anymore. It's professional. So now to me, the question is how in the name of goodness do we get structure? And I listen to smart people who believe now with the results of the election that there's a much better chance that Congress will get involved and help orchestrate some guardrails, build some guardrails, because the universities clearly are. I mean, there is no NCAA anymore, and the universities don't, because they're all involved in self-interest. There's no collective concern to build those guardrails. So I believe that's the ultimate answer here, is that the business model's in place, but let's make it so it's just like the pros, where everybody can make money in the pros, but there's a way you do it. There's a structure because, and you say, why do I have to have structure? Because you sell tickets. You're a competitive enterprise. And if we don't have competition, then we have wrestling, which is performance. And that's fine. If you want to call it performance art, that's great. That's what wrestling is, and wrestling no longer tries to hide it. I think sport doesn't want that. And if you want to make sure that we have a competitive enterprise, then there has to be structure, which the NFL, of course, is the gold standard at, to make sure that all 32 of their members every year have a chance. So I strongly feel that's where this thing has to happen. And again, I'm not smart enough to know, but let me throw one other thing at you, Spence, because we haven't talked for a while. And I'll just finish with this. And I thought a lot about this during the year, my belief that we're going to have a super league and it could be anywhere 40 to 50 teams anymore. And I've started to realize I think we already have it. And if you look at the SEC, Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Florida, now Texas, that's maybe very equivalent to the 49ers, Bears, Giants, Cowboys, Eagles of the NFC. The SEC's owned by a network. ESPN owns them.
Yep.
Well, the NFC's owned by a network, Fox. Then you look at the Big Ten. And wait a second. We have Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, USC. Now Oregon is pushing its way into trying to be that national brand. And you can say, well, that's kind of like having the Steelers and the Patriots and the Raiders and the Broncos and the Chiefs. And the AFC's owned by a network, CBS. And Fox owns the Big Ten. They own it. Okay. What's to stop the ESPN and Fox and their respective conferences that they own from just saying, listen, each of our leagues, we're just going to play off and have a champ. We'll have our Big Ten champ and our SEC champ, and then we're just going to play a Super Bowl. The heck with this 12 teams. Why are we sharing with Boise State and Notre Dame and Penn State's in the Big Ten, but Arizona State? Why are we sharing with them? We'll just do our own Super Bowl, College Bowl, whatever you want to call it. I think that's maybe a more realistic end game, and that would achieve the breakaway of the schools that are already professional, and it would leave the Florida States and the Clemsons and the Notre Dames and probably a couple of other schools that want to think they're in that category just saying, whoa, wait a second, what about us? Can't leave us behind.
Yeah, Ted, when we have more time, you and I are just going to fix college football in the world, my friend. But I know you have to run. It's always a pleasure. I hope you're well. And if anytime you have time, we have time for you here, okay?
No, and it goes the same way, Spence. And I'll enjoy talking to you and say hi to everybody. I miss coming to see I saw Kyle in the spring, but I missed football this year, and I miss seeing Craig in basketball. So hopefully I'll get back soon.
For sure. We'll be pulling for the Irish tonight, okay?
All right, good. Thanks, man.
All right, great Ted Robinson. Notre Dame alum. He is a broadcasting legend. He has done everything. Olympics, golf, tennis, basketball, football. Was the first voice hired by the Pac-12, and obviously, Pac-12 didn't last, sadly. But TV is still a thing, and if you watch it, you're probably paying too much, whatever that is. YouTube TV, get all the apps, suddenly you're paying more than cable. Well, Ryan from the Dish Pros can help you save money on your TV situation, on your wireless situation, and your intranet situation. All you have to do is dial 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan? Did we lose Ryan? All right. Well, trust me. Give him a call. New year, new budget, save a little money. The number is 801-424-DISH. All right, the ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff is here. Time for your shot to win $1,000 in cash to pay your bills. Text LUCKY to 508-777-1000. That's LUCKY to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 in cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from all of us here at ESPN 700. Do a little sports score coming up next with our friends from Handy and Handy. You got it dialed into the drive on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. It is Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday afternoon, right about now, with our good friends over at Handy and Handy. Garrett and Preston Handy. Happy Thursday, gentlemen. How we doing?
Hey, Spence. Happy Thursday.
Hi, Spence.
Appreciate the time today. So let's start with a story that kind of shook the world of sports media. The Fox Sports lawsuit involving Skip Bayless, Joy Taylor, and others. Haven't talked much about it on the program because it's a little, I don't know, awkward. But you guys break it down for us. Where are we at with it?
Yeah, Spence. I mean, this bombshell hit this week, like you said, and Noshin Taraji, never heard of her before, but all of a sudden she's all over the news. Who she is she's a hairstylist, but not just a hairstylist. She is a Fox Sports employee hairstylist, and that's important. Well, comes out this week that she has filed a bombshell lawsuit alleging 14 counts of battery, but more specifically, she's alleging sexual harassment based on unwanted advances, unwanted touching, comments, insulting comments, that type of thing. And if you want to read it in the articles, you can read all the salacious details, but not here on Sports Court. She has named Skip Bayless, host of Undisputed. I know it's popular. I've never really watched it, but also Charlie Dixon, who's a Fox Sports executive, and this Joy Taylor, who I think she might be on the program with Skip Bayless. So she's alleged all of this stuff, and she's also alleged retaliation. She claims that she reported this stuff to Fox Sports executives, but she was ignored. She was insulted. She was criticized. Nobody, she claims, didn't take her seriously. So, this thing's going to blow up, and I think there's speculation that others will be specifically named. I mean, when you're an employee and in the course and scope of your employment, you're under the direction of, you're an agent, and so your employer gets named too, because that's the big fish, that's the big pocket. But she has to prove all of her elements, and I think the key to this is, some of the elements of harassment claims are, unwanted advance or requests, verbal or physical harassment, offensive remarks, hostile work environment. She claims that there was retaliation and harassment used for employment decisions, that type of thing. I think this is going to come down to a lot of testimony. I think the most important thing is how she reported it and how she documented it and who knew about it. That's where I think her proof is going to come in. She has to prove it in a civil case like this by preponderance of evidence. My guess is it'll never make it to trial. It's being played out in the media right now, but we'll see what happens. There'll be an answer and probably other people named.
All right, Garrett, you're up, buddy.
Well, she called in the lawsuit, says, Fox is a misogynistic, racist, and ableist workplace. And so there's a lot of those details, and Preston talked about that. But one of the interesting causes of action that seems a little tangential to me, but she accuses Fox of failing to pay minimum wage and overtime wages and wants it certified as a class action. It seems to me like that would be a separate lawsuit, but that is part of what she's claiming here. So there's quite a bit going on.
Just because it's on the rundown, I'll ask you if you want to discuss the fact that Shannon Sharp has recently addressed his role, I guess, or lack thereof, in this whole thing.
He's named, and he comes out emphatically, says, I am not named as wrongdoer. He's named in it for issues where Skip Bayless talked about him, and and he was there for years, so his name is coming up, and but there's no allegations against him, and he's not named, and he wants to make that very clear. He's glad he's over at ESPN now.
All right, moving on. A story we have covered. It's the lawsuit filed against the Clippers by their former assistant performance coach, Randy Shelton, tied to the signing of Kawhi Leonard, and there's an update. What do you guys have? What do you have for us?
Yeah, so just to remind people a little bit, because it's been a little while that we talked about it, but Randy Shelton is, I think he's essentially a physical therapist, but he's a long-standing relationship with Kawhi Leonard, I think really back to his days at San Diego State, but was also, performance coach for Kawhi Leonard at the Spurs and the Raptors. And what ended up happening here is the Clippers want to sign Kawhi, and so they get Randy Shelton in the barn and use that as a way to sort of induce Kawhi Leonard to sign with the Clippers. And so things deteriorate, and some of that is over how Shelton handled and advised the Clippers regarding Kawhi's injuries, and he wanted the team to take a more conservative approach with his knee injury and some ankle injuries, and didn't like how they were handling it. And the relationship soured, and he was terminated. So he's brought an employment lawsuit against them for wrongful termination and retaliation, kind of similar to the one we just talked about in some ways. It brings up an interesting point about whether or not the Clippers violated any tampering rules with the NBA. And so that kind of is out there as part of this case. But really what's happening now, and it comes down to the fact that this guy, he's got an employment contract with the Clippers. And so because of that, with this NBA team, guess what? They're pushing the arbitration clause. We talk about that a lot on Sports Court. It seems like any of these teams or leagues are going to enforce their arbitration clauses. So they filed a motion to do just that. And if that happens, and if that's granted, then we're not going to hear a lot about the details, because the arbitration will essentially take place behind closed doors.
All right, Preston, your turn to take a crack at this one.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot, and these sports organizations and even corporations now, they're really enforcing these arbitration things. Why? Because they don't want it played out in the public. They've come out and said he's trying to make a public spectacle of this and trying to defame, inflammatory headlines. He wants this played out in the media. He wants the Clippers to look bad. And I think we've talked about dozens of these, and I think the only one that's really gotten any legs is, and he might lose in the end, but Gruden is, up on appeal. He's filed, lost, went up on appeal. Now he's getting an appeal with a panel of judges, and we haven't heard what's happened on that. But he's kind of the only one that's still in the game. He's trying to avoid having to arbitrate his case, and the arbitrator being Goodell, because that's not going to look good for him.
Nope.
So that's the only one that's really gotten legs.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right. Latest with the Padres family fight over to Major League Baseball. The former owner's widow is now suing his brothers. So a rich family fighting in-house. What do we have here?
Exactly. So what happened was we got Peter Seidler, he was the owner of, and he recently passed away, and he left a widow, but he also left two brothers. And ostensibly he left the team to his widow, but the team was held in trust, and basically his brothers are named as trustees to manage the team. And so now Schill, his widow, is coming forward with a lawsuit, and her main allegations are that they have a conflict of interest. She's claiming that they have a fiduciary duty to the trust, but they are, as she alleges, they're conspiring to sell trust assets to themselves below market value. If that comes out, that looks bad. She's also claiming that, on his deathbed, Peter basically said, I want this to go to you and to my children and to be left to you, and you guys have control. So the big issue right now is control. I think it's also interesting that in her lawsuit, sometimes these just kind of outside details they hope that will influence a lawsuit, but she claims that as part of her lawsuit, racist, profane, and hateful communications directed at her by the brothers because she is of Indian descent. And so she's claiming that's part of why they're keeping her out. She's still got a burden to prove all of this, but it's going to come down to a lot of testimony. It's going to come down to the terms of the trust, really. But if she's going out this as, hey, as trustees, you have fiduciary duties, and if you don't meet those duties, you're in breach of those duties, and we can wrest control from you. So I think a lot of testimony of what people thought the intent was and that type of thing will go to her ability to prove this. We'll see how it works out.
All right, Garrett, what do you got, buddy?
Well, I think it should come down to the fact that she actually lives in Texas, and the two brothers live in Southern California. So, if anybody's going to control the team, let's go with the brothers who live in Southern California. But or maybe we can just make something like this into a Hulu documentary or miniseries, because a lot of drama in this family.
That I would watch. I'm not going to lie. All right, moving over to the Utah Hockey Club, the potential for the new name. Most people think it's Yeti, which I just, you know what, whatever. This is not an opinion segment. So, trademark lawyers, okay, oh, goodness gracious. But, hey, it's not my club. The man with the gold makes the rules. What's the latest with this process and some of the trademark stuff they've got to get done before this is official?
Yeah, there's a good article today in the Tribune by Belle Frazier and some good reporting on this, and kind of talks about it because, we're all wondering, right? What's the name of the team going to be? And so again, just to rewind a little bit, right after the team is announced that the purchase of the Coyotes and they're coming to Utah, a few days later, about 20 trademark applications were filed with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So again, a lot of the Yeti, the Mammoth, the Ice, the Outlaws, the Blizzards, the Venom. We've all kind of heard some of the different options. So this article does a pretty good job of going through sort of the process of doing that and filing all these applications, and whether or not, if you're just going to file these applications, they're going to be placeholders. I mean, is that legitimate, or do you actually have the terminology is the intent to use this trademark? The big hang up right now with the Yeti, Spence, on Get What You Want is, I guess, Yeti Coolers and Drinkware Company. They're a big brand, and you wouldn't think that there would be any overlap between these two between the cooler company and between the hockey league, right? These are different fields. They shouldn't overlap. But apparently Yeti has gone ahead and dipped their toe into Yeti Coolers into the NHL market a little bit by letting people laser engrave their NHL logo on their drinkware. And so I don't know that that's going to be a big enough overlap to cause a problem, but that's something that they're looking at.
All right, Preston, you're up, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this so many times on Sports Court. Copyright, trademarks, licensing have become a huge, huge part of sports marketing and professional teams. And, they go in there and they try to license and trademark and patent all these different names. And so now they've got to go through the process. And we've talked about several on Sports Court where someone jumps up and says, whoa, you can't use that because we've got it. And, it's going to confuse the marketplace, and that's why they do it, so there's not confusion. I like the Utah the Utah Hockey Club. I think that's kind of cool.
You and I are of one mind, Preston. Great minds, buddy. I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad you're in that space, but we're in the minority, so I don't think it's going to go down. But our last one today, I have found this really fascinating. I've had friends of mine visit to go skiing, and they end up in Park City, and they're sending me videos of lines that are hours and hours and hours long. I mean, a portion of the mountain has been closed, and there's been this strike by the ski patrol because they have not been paid a livable wage, and the private equity involved in Vail. We could get into that for hours and hours and hours, but it appears that we may have some movement towards a potential agreement. Give us an update here.
Yeah, I think there is an agreement. It says a tentative agreement, but I think there's an agreement in place for the most part, and that's good for the ski patrollers. I mean, the background of this is they've been trying forever to get these issues taken care of, primarily the issue of wages, and they filed a complaint with the labor organization, and there was talk about mediation, and they didn't, and, they didn't get what they wanted. So what'd they do? Unions strike, and they want their voices heard, and not only were they wanting their voices heard, but it had a real impact on Park City Mountain Resort, which is owned by Vail, and it includes the Canyons Resort, massive resort there, and it had a real effect on the operations and safety and things getting taken care of up there. And we've got report that there's an agreement. The key material points of the agreement are that, and this doesn't sound like a lot, right? A $2 an hour increase in some instances, and a $4 for senior patrollers, in some instances $7.75, but that's a very few. And the person who negotiated this came out and said this contract is more than just a win for our team. It's groundbreaking success in the ski and mountain worker industry. This effort demonstrates what we can be achieved when workers stand together and fight for what they deserve. And that's really it here. They took a stand, and it was risky, and they took a stand, and maybe this little bump in hourly wage is not a lot, but it's going to cost Vail a lot more money, and it's going to result in their operations being more safely run. And my guess is it'll be passed on to the consumer. I think that's probably what's going to happen. You'll see lift prices go up every year. They do, but across industry-wise, I think ski patrollers were keeping a close eye on this. Not just Vail-owned, but all of the big owners that have come in and gobbled up the ski resorts. So it sounds like it's a win.
All right, Garrett, final word is yours, my guy.
Well, sometimes timing is everything, and I think having this strike happen when it did, right over the holiday, just as the ski season is ramping up, really helped the union get a deal done, because Vail just couldn't let that go on. So good to see it done.
All right, gentlemen, before I say you loose for this Thursday, for any of our listeners who have legal questions, how can they get a hold of you over at Handy and Handy?
Yeah, absolutely. We love coming on here with you, Spence, and would love to help out any of the listeners out there with their legal questions, especially in the area of personal injury, which is